WABC, welcome to the Savage Nation. Go ahead, please.
No, Mike. I have to say, I think if you're trying to find an example of the death panels, the idea of Sebelius' comments are probably not your best option. And I'd ask all your listeners to put themselves in the following position. You've got a limited supply of organs. You only have a limited number of lungs. And you have the difficult and, as Sebelius said, agonizing decision of trying to come up with a decision of if there's one lung and 10 people who want it, who gets it. And it's heartbreaking to think there's an 11-year-old who needs it. There's also a 15-year-old who needs it, a 20-year-old needs it, a 30-year-old who needs it, all of which I think we would be very sad if they didn't get the lung. So someone has to make a decision, and they found that people who are under 12 years old are less likely to be able to survive the surgery, less likely to be able to survive the medication. And so they say, well, if we have this lung, let's give it to someone who has the best chance of surviving with it.
Okay, it makes medical sense, but it doesn't make human sense. That's the problem.
What?
I'm aware of what... By the way, I agree with everything you just said. The survival rate of a child with a transplanted lung is quite low. And my guess is, though, I'll put it to you this way, Mike, what if we had a Muslim in Guantanamo who needed a lung? Do you think that they would bend the rules for the Muslim interned at Guantanamo to make certain that we're seen well in the Islamic world?
Why are you changing the subject? Why can't you...
Well, I just asked you. You're telling me that this system never bends the rules and bypasses the rules for special cases?
Tragically, every case that needs a lung transplant is special. That's why they have very strict rules.
No, I understand that, but what if we had a Muslim terrorist on Guantanamo who needed a liver transplant? Wouldn't they put him at the top of the list to show how compassionate we are? You know they would. And you also know that they've bent the rules before, and they could have bent the rules again for this child. And they won't bend the rules because they're showing us what's coming under the radical socialist Obamacare that's coming.
No, they're not bending the rules because they don't want a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old who has a much higher chance of surviving to die just because...
Then why have we read of cases where people incarcerated for life, for rape or whatever, were given liver transplants? How does that figure? Why should they be put on the list at all?
What case? You're making up cases now.
No, I'm not making up cases, doctor. I mean, I'm an epidemiologist by training, and I read the literature quite readily, which you ought to do once in a while to get away from your busy practice. Because if you look into the epidemiological literature, you'll find out that livers have been given to people on in life with life in prison.
They have.
Why would that? So what my point is that the rules have been bent before on transplants. Why would they not bend the rules in this case is the question.
I'm saying I don't think they've ever bent the rules. Do you have any examples where they've bent the rules? No.
All you've got to do is do a quick Medline search, and you'll find the answer. Do a Medline search. Prisoners and transplants. You'll get your answer, Doc. I was challenged in the last hour by a doctor who called from WABC in New York to give him one example of inmates receiving organs, okay? And I thought that I was going to find in my research, my quick research, inmates who were in, prison for life. But no, it's worse. Here's a headline from ABC News. Death row inmate seeks organ transplant. Death row inmate. Pay attention, Doc. Thanks. It says, sometimes crime can pay even on death row if you're in need of a new kidney. Thanks to the state of Oregon, where the aura is gone, a law-abiding citizen in need of a kidney transplant may have to die so that death row prisoner Horacio Alberto Reyes Camarena can live. Reyes Camarena has been on Oregon's death row since 1996 when he was convicted of repeatedly stabbing 32 and 18-year-old sisters he met in a farm labor camp. The older woman survived 17 stab wounds to testify against him. Every year, as Reyes Camarena appeals his conviction in Oregon, which is struggling through budget cuts and having a tough time providing a basic education for its children and health care for its poor citizens, it pays about $121,000 a year to keep Reyes Camarena on dialysis. Last month, his prison doctor determined he was a good candidate for a kidney transplant. And remember, he's on a death row. With the state funding his medical care, Reyes Camarena could be placed on a transplant waiting list ahead of others who did not commit any crimes and become the state's first death row inmate to receive an organ transplant. In 1976, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that prisoners were entitled to the same medical and dental treatment as everyone else in their community. Prisons that withhold necessary care from inmates can be held liable for violating constitutional bans against cruel and unusual punishment. Now, let me pause right here in the article. That's where the shyster lawyers have come in. The lice with law degrees have jumped in California in particular. The shyster lice have jumped in and are suing the state of California because the health care of prisoners is not adequate. And the shysters learn this in the law schools. They pick different fields. One goes after the prisons, one goes after the military, one goes after the universities, one goes after the Ten Commandments, another team of shysters goes out against... you got the picture. Shall I read the rest of the article? Reyes Camarena's case is not unprecedented. In California last year, a jailed felon received a heart transplant that cost taxpayers $1 million, and another inmate received a kidney that cost $120,000. In Georgia, a convicted murderer underwent heart bypass surgery costing $70,000. Shall I read on? Now, why would you want to keep alive a death row inmate? Answer, because of the shyster lawyers who would otherwise sue the system. Shall I go on? I'm not going to go on. I think it's as depressing as you can get. It just shows you, though, that the rules are bent, the rules can be bent. It's a matter of which side the shysters are on. But since the shysters are not on the side of 10-year-old children, most likely she will not get the lung. The shyster would rather give the money to a sexual predator on death row. That's my opinion. You don't like it? Go listen to NPR, where you'll hear where you hear Vivaldi music and think you're sophisticated. Go ahead. Go listen to Vivaldi and think you're intelligent and sophisticated on your way to the opera.